What if the red flags you ignore aren't warnings of who they might become, but undeniable proof of who they already are? Most people don't miss red flags because they're naive. They miss them because their nervous system was trained to confuse pain with love. If chaos once meant connection, if distance once meant safety, if silence once kept you alive, then dysfunction won't alarm you. It'll recognize you. Nietzsche warned, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. But what if the tribe was your family, and survival meant silence? You don't ignore red flags. You normalize them. Because the cost of seeing the truth too early is abandonment. But your body never stops noticing. Your exhaustion is evidence. Your guilt is data. Your confusion is a coded alert system your mind can't yet decode. And the 13 signs we're about to uncover? They aren't just warnings, they're forensic, psychological fingerprints, proof that you're not being loved. You are being assessed for obedience, for emotional pliability. Not do you feel safe, but will you self-abandon on command? Let's begin. There are certain people that leave you feeling drained after talking to them. Not confused, not challenged, drained, as if every conversation pulled something vital out of you. This isn't overthinking, it's energetic extraction. Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. When someone refuses to meet themselves honestly, they begin outsourcing that burden onto you. These people don't regulate through self-awareness. They regulate through proximity. They regulate through you. They drain your clarity to buffer their chaos. They hijack your empathy to stabilize their ego. And here's the trick. They don't always yell. They smile. They vent. They praise you for how safe they feel, right before your chest tightens and your clarity dissolves. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Compassion is the basis of morality." But compassion, weaponized, becomes submission, especially when your attunement is mistaken for obligation. So if your body already feels exhausted in the beginning, ask yourself, what is it preparing to survive? You aren't wrong, but you apologize anyway. Not to make things right, but to make things quiet. This isn't guilt. It is fear management, a survival reflex drilled into your nervous system long before you met them. You sense the truth would escalate things, so you trade it for compliance, because in systems of control, the truth is dangerous. And if you grew up punished for speaking honestly, you learned to weaponize self-blame as protection. Nietzsche called it out. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. When you apologize for things you don't understand, you teach your body that peace is earned through self-erasure. And it works, but only temporarily. Because every "I'm sorry, you didn't mean" is another step away from yourself. And once you've betrayed yourself enough times, you forget what real safety even feels like. They don't mock your feelings because they are too big. They mock them because they are too accurate. Sensitivity isn't weakness, it's threat detection. It's the subconscious screaming what your mind hasn't made conscious yet. You notice the micro shifts, the pauses, the fake smiles, the anger behind the laugh, and they notice you noticing. So they do what manipulators do best. They rebrand your intuition as instability. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. You overthink everything. And it works. You stop trusting your gut. You call wisdom overreaction. You call perception paranoia. Carl Jung said, "The most dangerous things are the ones we deny in ourselves." But you're not in denial. You are being trained to doubt your own clarity. Once they break your trust in your own nervous system, they don't need to gaslight you anymore. You'll do it for them. You mistake it for depth, but what you experience isn't connection. It is a setup. Emotional oversharing, too fast, too soon, is not vulnerability. It's strategy. It's the weaponized version of closeness, a way to fast-track your empathy before your discernment kicks in. In trauma psychology, this is called flooding, a manipulative technique where personal disclosures are used to hijack intimacy and collapse boundaries. You aren't being chosen. You are being disarmed. And once you're holding their pain, you're less likely to notice the patterns that caused it. You're less likely to walk away. They offload their chaos into your nervous system and call it connection. Philosopher Erich Fromm warned that immature love says, "I love you because I need you." But mature love says, "I need you because I love you." This isn't love, it's emotional conscription. And when you're drafted into someone's damage before you've even built trust, you don't get to choose who you are. They choose for you. They don't want you. They want a reflection. Someone who validates their narrative, reinforces their identity, projects back the version of themselves they need to believe is real. This is not love, it's psychological mirroring, where your existence is tolerated only insofar as it's useful. In Lacanian psychoanalysis, the mirror stage marks the birth of ego, a self not based on authenticity, but on image. And in toxic relationships, that ego isn't just theirs, it becomes yours. You begin living as the version of yourself they can tolerate. The moment your reflection glitches, you disagree, you change, you grow, you become a threat. Because now they have to confront reality. And most people would rather destroy the mirror than see themselves clearly. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But in this dynamic, only one of you was allowed to evolve. So you shrink, not because you lack identity, but because theirs demands you abandon your own. This is the split between logic and energy. Their explanations are tidy, rational, maybe even persuasive. But your stomach tightens, your jaw clenches, your chest constricts. That isn't paranoia, it's somatic dissonance, the war between your nervous system and their narrative. In trauma-informed psychology, this is called cognitive emotional incongruence. The language may be convincing, but your gut detects what intellect can't yet name. Because truth doesn't live in words, it lives in resonance. And when their voice calms your mind but agitates your body, you're not confused. You're being psychologically split. Nietzsche once said, "All credibility, all good conscience, all evidence of truth comes only from the senses." But when you've been trained to override your senses, to obey reason over instinct, you start mistaking manipulation for maturity. You call it conflict avoidance. They call it a conversation. But your body calls it danger. And if every word sounds safe, but your breath keeps shallow, is it really understanding, or is it surrender? They don't say, "Don't leave." They don't have to. Their silence after you asked for space says enough. This is how psychological control works. Not with overt threats, but with subtle punishments. Space is where truth emerges. So in toxic dynamics, it becomes the enemy. Not because they want you close, but because distance breaks the spell. In trauma-bonded systems, even silence becomes surveillance. You're monitored through withdrawal, trained to self-regulate in their favor. So instead of asking, you start compensating. Instead of resting, you start performing. And eventually, your need for space doesn't feel valid. It feels like abandonment. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But no one becomes anything in captivity. Growth requires space. Control can't survive it. So when love feels contingent on proximity, you're not in a relationship. You're in a containment protocol. And when even your breath feels like a betrayal, you've already made yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's comfort." Not all apologies are reparations. Some are reconstructions of the narrative, designed to protect the image, not heal the wound. I'm sorry you feel that way. Translation: your pain is inconvenient to my self-concept. I didn't mean it like that. Translation: my intention matters more than your impact. Why are you so sensitive? Translation: you're the problem. These phrases aren't bridges, they're gaslights, defensive maneuvers to avoid accountability while appearing remorseful. This is emotional sleight of hand. They don't deny the event. They deny your right to interpret it. True apology is an act of self-confrontation. It says, "I see how I hurt you, and I won't hide behind good intentions." But shallow apologies weaponize shame. They make you question your own hurt just to keep the peace. Jung warned, shame is a soul-eating emotion. But in toxic dynamics, it's also a tool, used to keep you quiet, used to keep you small. Because once you're ashamed of asking for truth, you stop asking. And when truth becomes taboo, you're not being loved, you're being managed. You don't lose your voice all at once. You trade it, quietly. One hesitation at a time. You edit your sentences mid-thought. Rephrase your truths to sound softer. Filter every decision through an unspoken audit. Will this upset them? This is not caution. This is internalized surveillance. You became both the prisoner and the warden. It's easy to mistake it for kindness, empathy, even maturity. But it's not. It's conditioned compliance, a psychic erosion designed to keep you small. Carl Jung called this the false self, a personality constructed not from authenticity, but from adaptation to threat. You don't grow into this self, you shrink into it. And soon, your thoughts don't feel like your own. Your needs feel selfish, and your silence becomes second nature. The worst part? You applaud yourself for it. You call it love. You call it loyalty. But the moment your nervous system is writing the script and fear is directing the scene, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. And the longer the act continues, the more applause you need just to feel real. It feels electric, like a spotlight turned on just for you. They call you different. They say no one ever understands them the way you do. You aren't just liked. You are chosen. But being chosen is not always a gift. Sometimes it's a setup. Not to see you, but to use you. The early intensity isn't always intimacy. It is identification. The fast tracking of closeness to bypass your boundaries. They don't ask who you are. They project who they need you to be. And every compliment is bait, a way to shape your behavior by tying it to their approval. This is the architecture of love bombing. Not love, but the simulation of connection, engineered to trigger attachment before discernment can catch up. Camus once wrote, "To be loved for being ourselves is rare. Often, we are loved for our usefulness." And that's what this is. Utility masquerading as affection. You aren't seen, you are scouted, evaluated for compliance, then given a role in their fantasy. And the more special you feel, the more invested you become in proving you deserved it. But the pedestal isn't a compliment. It's a spotlight that blinds you right before they disappear. You test it, gently. A small truth, a quiet no, a need, a fear, and the air changes, not with dialogue, with distance, disappointment, withdrawal. So you adapt. You edit yourself mid-sentence, pause before speaking, swallow the truth before it becomes a problem. Not because you are deceitful, but because honesty becomes dangerous. This is the psychological economy of unsafe connection. Authenticity becomes currency, and you start budgeting it to avoid emotional debt. You learn to lie in small ways, to perform peace, to trade honesty for access, until one day you can't tell whether your silence is survival or surrender. Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And that's what this becomes. Not miscommunication, but a slow erasure of self. You're not loved, you're tolerated, as long as you comply, because the moment your truth threatens the illusion punishes the truth. And in that theater, every truth becomes a risk, and every silence a shield. It doesn't happen all at once. At first it feels romantic. Two lives weaving together, two paths becoming one. But slowly, your world shrinks. Your goals become flexible. Your plans get postponed. Your voice gets quieter in your own dreams, until the future isn't something you envision. It is something you fit into. That's not unity. It's absorption. And it's a hallmark of covert domination. Replace your reality with theirs, until you forget you ever had one. Jung called this loss of self psychic contamination, where your boundaries dissolve into another's identity, not through force, but through emotional conditioning. You don't stop dreaming because you lack direction. You stop because dreaming becomes disloyalty. Their priorities became the compass. And yours? An inconvenience. Albert Camus once warned, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." But there's no rebellion in quiet compliance, just a slow surrender of sovereignty disguised as love. And the longer you disappear, the more the silence sounds like truth, and the more you mistake invisibility for peace. The final trap isn't rage, it is guilt. You stay because you believe they can't survive without you. You see their wounds, you carry their pain, you hold their chaos so they didn't have to. But while you protect them from collapse, you are the one unraveling. Love isn't supposed to cost you, and sacrifice isn't noble when it's demanded. This is the psychology of enmeshment, where your nervous system wires itself around their fragility until protecting them becomes your identity. And while you hold their world together, yours is collapsing in silence. Nietzsche warned, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." You disappear, bit by bit, until you believe your only value is what you can prevent in them. But anyone who requires your self-abandonment to stay regulated isn't healing. They're hijacking. And when you become the villain in your own story just to be the hero in theirs, you're not in love. You're in captivity. You're not naive. You're perceptive, but conditioned to override it. So when your body signals danger, you call it overthinking. When your sensitivity fires alarms, you label it dysfunction. But these 13 red flags, they aren't theories. They're data, evidence of distortion, proof that your system registered the threat before your mind had language. You adapt, not because it's safe, but because it's necessary. You shrink, not because you lack strength, but because visibility once had a cost. And now you see it. You weren't too sensitive. You were too accurate for people invested in illusion. Let this be the rupture. Let this be the moment you trust what you feel more than what you're told. You aren't wrong. You are just surrounded by people who need you, disoriented to stay in control. That ends now. Which of these red flags did you experience too late? Let me know in the comments. Your insight might help someone else experiencing this exact situation right now. And if you're ready to start trusting yourself again, you're not alone. If you found yourself in any of these signs, watch our next video. Your clarity is just beginning.